best part of life, our ability to entertain ourselves. Okay, so ignore this empty shelf down here. I'm in the process of rearranging some things. All right, so hello, hi, it's me, Crystal, and welcome to another video. There's some noise. The camera's probably picking up, it's fine. So, there's some construction noise. Okay, I've completely lost my train of thought. So basically, I thought it would be fun to kind of talk about some of the reasons why I don't talk that much about what I'm working on until I'm done. Because I noticed that when I was editing my video where I was talking about what I was working on, I realized I didn't actually tell you anything about the stories other than the genres. I just kind of told you like how I was working on them and how long I was working on them and like just part of like the general process involved in working on them. And it's like there's vague and then there's like a next level vague, and that was like some next level vague. And I realized I'm like, nobody can even figure out anything anywhere close to what I'm doing based on what I said. Because I think all I told you about Winter, which is the story that I finished editing in May, is that it was a supernatural horror. And I think all I've said about my current project, which I've just been calling This Is Ari's Project, I think all I said was that it was like a weird horror thing with like maybe some dark romance elements. And in my head, that was very descriptive. But I realized upon reflection that I was basically saying nothing. So I thought it would be fun to do this video where I give you some more, now that Winter's done, I give you some more information on what the story is actually about and give some reasons why I like to wait until I'm done, because I just thought that it was interesting. Because over the years, you know, you have these experiences and those experiences make you kind of want to clam up a little bit. But before I get started, I do have a progress update on my Ari story. And one, I have a title, and I'm so in love with this title, and I will wait until I'm done for the reasons I will explain in this video. And I just crossed the 70,000 word mark as is the filming of this video. According to just the way I'm feeling about how much story I have left to tell, I think I have about 20,000 words. I hope. I don't have too much more than 20,000 words, but I really enjoy cutting things in the editing process. And so I'm not worried about how long this first draft is going to be. I'm just going to let it be whatever length it's going to be, and then we will cut it down when we edit. And I'm pretty sure I could probably get done with the story by the end of this month, and then maybe even like get to editing by August. And it shouldn't take me just too long to edit since I edit as I go. And then I can probably get back in the query field if I have to get back in the query field by like probably end of September, October. And I'm very excited about it because it's going really well and I'm having a lot of fun. And I'm feeling lost in this story to the point where I stop writing. I feel like I don't know where I am for a minute, and it's really nice. I mean, it's a little disconcerting, but I really enjoy that feeling when it comes to writing. So yeah, so let's talk about some reasons why I'm like super vague when I talk about what I'm working on until I'm done. So I wrote down some reasons to kind of hopefully keep me on track so I don't talk forever. So my first example has to do with the same project. So once upon a time, I had this story. It was like this King Arthur inspired thing where I was following a certain branch of the family into the modern day. It was actually set in like near future, but it was gonna be distracting for me to talk about the self-driving like taxis that I had. And so I just said that they called a car, and even though the cars didn't have a driver, the characters were used to that, so they just didn't mention it. And if I had mentioned it, then the reader would have questions, and I'm like, they can just insert whatever mode of transportation they want. It really doesn't matter. It's not important to the story, okay? It's just the world. But anyway, I had this King Arthur thing. And when I was getting the story together and developing it, I was calling it The Shades of My Shadow. I wanted to change the title so that I could avoid the word shadow because this was paranormal. And so at the time, time, I was hanging out with this woman, and we were supposed to go to a coffee shop, you know, a couple times a month or more, and like talk about our projects. Now, the entire time I was hanging out with her, which was about 4.5, 5 years, she did not work on anything. She talked about, you know, the notes that she had and what inspired the story, but she didn't actually like do anything. And it bothered me a little bit. Not that she didn't do anything, because that's her life. She doesn't want to write, she doesn't have to. But like, it kind of bothered me a little bit, because she would introduce me, when she would introduce me to people, she would say, oh, this is Crystal, and she's a very talented writer. I'm like, you haven't read anything I wrote. And she's inspiring me to get my book out. No, I'm not inspiring you to do anything. Okay. And so I'm just like, why are you telling people that? But anyway, okay, so I'm talking to her about the project, and she asked me what the title is. And so I tell her the working title. Working title means it's a work in progress. And maybe she didn't understand that. It doesn't matter either way. And so I tell her, oh, my working title is The Shades of My Shadow. And she screws her face up and she's like, you can do better than that. First of all, it was not that bad. Second of all, it was a working title. Third of all, why are you stomping on me so hard? That's what it felt like. Okay, so I ended up obsessing about my title. I didn't get anything done in the story. And then like a few years passed before I actually was working on the first draft. So I'm finally working on the first draft, and I'm almost done with it. And so she is asking me for a progress update, and it was me and her and this other woman. And they're like, oh yeah, tell us, like, how close are you to finishing? Like, what kind of ending are you going to have, or whatever? And so I was like, yeah, you know, I was thinking about, like, I'm either going to trap the Merlin character or I'm going to kill him, you know? And she's like, oh my God, you can't kill Merlin. And it's like, again, it's my story. I can kill whoever I want. And she was like, no, he's like iconic, and then you won't leave it open for a sequel, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I don't even write sequels, you know? And it's not that I've never had a sequel idea, and I don't want to write a sequel, but it's like for the same reason that, like, I was watching like some clips of interviews that Neil Gaiman has given over the years, and he was talking about how people are like, oh, Neil Gaiman doesn't write sequels. And he's like, I have sequel ideas, and they sound really interesting. It's just that most of the time, there's this shinier story over here, and I want to go over there. And I'm the same way. It's like, it's not that, you know, I don't want to write a sequel. It's that there's a shinier story right here. And I try to work on that. So, you know, we follow our passions. We go where our passions lie. So, and I was like, I brought this up. I'm like, I don't write sequels. I've literally never written a sequel in my life, you know? And she's like, well, things can change, and blah, blah, blah. And like literally harasses me until I agree not to kill Merlin. And the thing is, I did have as an alternative ending, but I wanted to wait until I got to the end of the story and just kind of like use my writer's intuition or something for like, where is the best place to end the story? And instead, I just went with, I guess we're going to trap him then, because the only people who can let him out are the main character and this other woman, and neither one of them are going to let him out. And the other woman's actually going to be working overtime to make sure that not another family member in this branch can ever let this guy out again. And it's just like, but it left me feeling like that was not the ending that I really wanted. I think I was leaning towards killing him because I wanted this whole saga to be over. This family has been through this stuff. This curse has been wreaking havoc on this family for hundreds of years, you know? And it's just like, I wanted it to be 100% done, not leaving it open for a future, you know, ancestor to like, you know, crack this nonsense open again. But so that's one of the reasons why sometimes I clam up when it comes to giving specifics about my story, because I don't want somebody to influence what I'm doing. Another reason why sometimes I clam up is because, you know, sometimes a girl can get insecure about stuff. And so if I start talking about what I'm doing and somebody cuts me off, then I feel like they're cutting me off because they don't want to hear what I have to say because I'm boring them. And then I start thinking, well, maybe I don't have a good idea. And, you know, I have OCD, and I have a validation tick with my OCD. And so sometimes, you know, I not only want validation, I want it multiple times. You know, and we've made a lot of progress on this in the last few years. But, you know, 5 years ago, this was very difficult for me to rein in. And so it was extra agitating. So, like, this example is actually like around Thanksgiving, and I have this uncle on my mom's side of the family. I'm the only uncle I have on my mom's side of the family, the only like non-great uncle anyway. And I feel like he should know me well enough, or he should have known me well enough at the time to know that just about anything that comes out of my mouth when I'm talking about my writing is going to be some kind of darkness. That's just the main thing that I do when I write. So I don't always do that, but it's like the main thing that I do. And so he asked me what I'm working on next after the last story that I had finished, like the last time I talked to him, which was probably a year ago. And I kid you not, like I'm not exaggerating in the slightest. I was in the middle of the first sentence and he cuts me off saying something like, oh, everything you write is so dark. And then he turns to my sister and starts talking about politics or sports or something. And then I was like, nobody cares about me. That's how I felt like. And that's not how you want to feel when you are writing a book. Because then I go and I sit down and write, and this is my fault and it's my responsibility not to react this way. But I kind of call this like risk management, right? It's like if I feel like somebody is going to say something that would trip me up even for 5 minutes, like 5 literal minutes where I will grumble in my head and then I move on. Sometimes it's better to just not risk it because I have the OCD and I don't know like what my brain is going to latch onto, and then I have to deal with that if it gets out of hand, And so it's like, if I feel like, somebody is going to cut me off or ignore me or insult me in some way, then I don't want to talk to them. Why would I want to talk to them? Risk management, okay? So that's another reason why sometimes I clam up, is because I don't want somebody to activate kind of like some self-worth issues that I may have. Okay, so the third reason is just unsolicited advice in general. So I kind of feel like sometimes when I have a work in progress, it's like a freshly hatched little baby bird, and it needs attention and nourishment and love and protection. I don't want somebody coming along and spitting on it like it's disgusting and it's rude. And that's kind of what I feel like. I feel like when I'm working on something, I've been writing for a while now, I feel like I have a pretty good handle on my process or whatever my process is for the particular book that I'm writing. And so I don't really want advice on my book unless I ask for it. If I'm stuck and I need to talk through something and work things out, then I will ask the person, can we like talk through this and work this out? Or I will ask them if they can like, help me with like getting over like a stumbling block or something. But if I don't ask for advice and I don't want any advice and then unsolicited advice, I kind of feel like they're judging me and they're telling me that they think my story isn't good enough. And again, risk management. So I understand that this is me interpreting it is where like I feel like, they're passing judgment on it or they don't like my idea when really they're probably just trying to be nice and help. And that's something that would, be helpful for them, but it's not something that's helpful for me. And just like an example of this happening recently, I was trying to explain to this woman I work with who's also a writer, and she's working on a dystopian idea, like a dystopian trilogy. And she was asking me about, how am I showing, that this girl is developing feelings for this guy. And I was trying to tell her, and she's just one of those people where like she asks a lot of follow-up questions, and I finally have realized that I just need to tell her I'm not done yet, and then like she'll like, I'm sorry, and she'll like let me finish. And so there's no malice behind it or anything. But at the time that I was having this conversation with her, she interrupts me twice. One to ask me what this guy looks like, and I'm like, it doesn't matter, And then she was like, oh, well, when you mentioned this, I imagine somebody who looks like this. I'm like, oh my gosh, she doesn't look like that at all. And I'm like, I don't know why you're doing this. And now I lost my train of thought, and now I don't know what I'm saying, And so, and then the other time she interrupts me, and I wasn't even done yet. I was in the middle of explaining how I'm showing the reader how I'm showing the reader that she has feelings for this guy, and explaining why she's developing feeling for this guy using things that I'm putting in the story, not just stuff that's in my head or whatever. And she's, she was like, oh, you should have like a romantic moment, between the two characters, and then she goes and talks about, some romantic moment that she had with some guy like 25 years ago. And I was just like, first of all, I gave up. Second of all, I was like, no. And she's like, no, you don't want to have like a romantic moment with them? I'm like, this guy's in a straitjacket. How romantic? You know what I'm saying? It's like they can't like touch each other. Anyway, so I'm just like, I'm like, can I just please just finish what I'm saying? And it's really frustrating. But it didn't bother me. Like, it didn't like mess up my story. I did keep thinking about it though, for a few days, like off and on. And I was like, am I getting that across? And it's like, you know what? Just stop, just keep going. We'll worry about it when we're editing, and we'll make sure everything is in place. Okay. So it didn't mess me up, but okay, so my fourth example is when I was participating in this work in progress marathon. And so it started like in the month of August 2013, where a bunch of writers, we like came together, and like every single Saturday we would do updates on our projects. And so we would say like, this is how much project, this is where I was last time, or this is where I'm starting, on this marathon. And then every single week we would say, this is where I was last week, this is where I am this week, these are, my wins and highs, these are my lows and struggles. And then we were invited to share, like a snippet of the last thing that we were working on. And it was like 250 words or less. So I looked at this as an opportunity to just kind of like give people an idea of what I was doing, and to just kind of like share, like your story with part of your story with a group of writers, and just kind of like cheer each other on or whatever. And they could either say, oh, that sounds really interesting, or not, you don't say anything because it's bad. So unless the person asks you to say something. And there was this one time where I was working on a paranormal romance, and it was door point of view, third person, present tense. And so I had this scene where like my antagonist had encapsulated herself in this forest, and the capsule had dissolved around her, and she was gathering her energy back. And there was just some kind of like poisonous, toxic fumes off-gassing out of the forest, and it was like this beautiful imagery. And so the main character is noticing this, and at the end I write something along the lines of, she runs home. And I wasn't at the end of the chapter. I don't even think that was the end of the scene, but it may have been the end of the scene. I don't remember. I have to go and dig it up and look at it. But like, there's this girl who commented, and I wasn't mad, okay? But she commented, and she was like, oh, this has such great, imagery and atmosphere. And then the last line ruined the whole thing for me. I'm like, it is not that serious. This is a work in progress. Okay, like maybe that line would go away when I'm editing, or maybe it wouldn't. But if it ruins the whole, it's not so bad that it's gonna ruin the entire scene for everybody. Like, it just ruins everything. And because she commented first, there were a handful of other people who also pointed out the same thing. They were like, oh yeah, it's like really good, but I agree with so-and-so, like you should take the last line out. And again, like, they don't know what I'm doing. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that was not the end of the chapter, but even if it was, it was not that bad. Okay. And again, this is a work in progress, and I just don't like people, scraping and touching and poking at the little baby bird when it's still in development. Okay, it's like, look, we will fix things later. It's like a sculpture. It's not always gonna look right, okay, when you're in the middle of it. So even though, again, this is my responsibility, I have learned how to do this over the years, it's my responsibility not to let this affect me. It did affect me, and I started overanalyzing everything that I was doing, and every single time I ended the scene, or every single time I ended the chapter, I thought about that. And again, I have OCD, so it was probably an OCD issue, and I did not have the handle on it, 10 years ago that I do now. So it was very difficult for me to move on from stuff. But it did cause me to overanalyze things, and made me very paranoid, and it also made me less willing to share what I'm doing going forward, because I didn't want somebody to say something about something. I was like, I'll just wait until I'm done. When I'm done, I see that kind of critique in a completely different light. As I'm building the story, it's something that's annoying. But when I'm done, it's something that like, oh, maybe that's helpful. Maybe I should take that line out. Maybe I should do this, maybe I should consider that. Maybe that's a good point. But when I'm building the story, I start I start worrying about the entire book, you know, and I start second guessing my instincts and second guessing everything I'm doing. And then like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And then I just fall apart. Okay. So my last example before I talk about what winter is about and give an example around that will maybe explain why I don't want to give too many details on what, you know, my Ari story is about. You know, it's kind of related to the unsolicited advice, but this is more like, it's not unsolicited advice, it's just people just straight up telling me what to do, you know. And it's similar to what I mentioned in my first example, when she was like literally, when that one was literally telling me how I should end my story and literally telling me that I need to change my title. It's kind of in that vein, only instead of it being like, it's kind of like people telling me like, oh, why don't you try writing, you know, like a happy story? Why don't you try having a happy ending for a change? And it's like, first of all, how dare you insinuate that my ending is not happy? Second of all, it's my story. Like, why are you telling me what to do with my story? Most of these people don't even write, okay? And even the ones that do write, it's like, you have your own book to write. You can end it however you want. It's like, I am going to end it the way I'm ending it. I'm going to put in the themes that I'm interested in. And it's like, yeah, I may one day, you know, write a rom-com or something. But it's like, right now, this is what I'm doing. And it would be nice if you, like, supported me or something. And so the reason why I don't like this kind of thing is that it feels unsupportive. It feels like they're not supporting me. It feels like they're telling me I'm doing something wrong and they don't like approve of what I'm doing. And I don't need their approval. But like when you have like a couple of people like mildly harassing you about like writing darker stories, and I'm in Tennessee. There are a lot of churches here, okay? I grew up in church, like it's fine. I understand where they're coming from, but it's like you are assuming that because my story is darker that there's something wrong with it, all right? Or that there's something wrong with me. And I've had to fight that for like most of my writing life. So sometimes I just find that annoying because it feels unsupportive, it feels judgy, and again, like it has in the past caused me to like question everything, and then I sit down to write and I literally can't do it because then I have all these other voices in my head and they're so loud, like I literally don't even know what I want to do anymore. I can't hear anything in my head anymore. So now, moving on. The last thing is, what is winter about? Because I realized the only thing that I've told you about this story is that it's a supernatural horror. I felt like I was being very descriptive, but really I was not saying anything. So winter, now that it's done, because I'm not going to be doing any more editing at this point without a reason to do more editing, meaning that, you know, I get an agent, the agent wants to do some edits, you know, before we go on submission, I'd be happy to do that. Or the editor, the publishing house, you know, we got to do some edits before the book comes out, of course, you know, but like if it's just going to sit on my computer, I'm not going to edit it anymore. There's a loud noise outside. I don't know if you can hear it or not. But anyway, so as far as the story just sitting on my computer, I'm just going to call it The Haunting of Amelina Wright, try to be done with it. But the Korean title is just going to be Winter because that's just the decision that I made. So it is a Crucible retelling. And that's is also still incredibly vague. And you might think, okay, well, can't you be like this vague with the story that you're working on? No. And the reason why is because it's also a retelling and inspired by another story. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, okay, well, what is the harm? And like, and this is how my brain works. I'm like, what is the potential risk of me telling people more details? And then I immediately thought of one because I'm doing a Crucible retelling. It's like, imagine that I'm talking to somebody and they're like, oh, what's your story about? What is your story about? And I was like, oh, it's like a Crucible inspired story, you know, set in modern day in the rural South with like the supernatural horror overlay. And they might say, oh, that sounds really cool. Of course it does. And they're like, so what did you do with, like, let's say that they're one of the 3 people who actually know what I'm talking about when I talk about the Crucible. And they're like, so what are you doing with the Tituba character? Like, how are you, like, interpreting that in this modern day setting? And I was like, oh, I don't really have that character. I have somebody who plays that role, but I don't have that character, And then they're like, oh my gosh, you have to have that character. The character is vital and it's just so interesting and blah, blah, blah. And so then if you can imagine, if I'm in the middle of working on this story, I'm near the beginning or I'm towards the middle, then potentially I could fixate on that and think, oh, well, should I have that character? Am I doing something wrong? Do I need to be doing something different? Like, do you see how I could spiral? And so I'm like, why don't I just wait until I'm done and I'll tell you what I'm doing when, minimal changes will be made to the story and I can, like, stand behind what I did because it's done and I love it. So Winter is inspired by the Crucible. It's a supernatural horror. And basically we have a teenage girl who is kind of obsessed with this married guy, and so her and her friends go into the woods to try to conjure a spirit to help them get what they want. And Annalena wants to get rid of this guy's wife, and she wants to ruin her life, drive her out of town. And the spirit kind of takes over, and he's very manipulative, and he, like, wrecks their lives, and it's really fun, and it's dark, and it's really fun. So that's what the story is about. And I've been working on, like, log lines and, like 1-sentence pitches and stuff, and I have a really good one, I think, for my Ari story, which I will tell you guys when I'm done. So that's what Winter's about, and I've finished editing it around the end of May. I think I did a few edits at the beginning of this month, just, like, cleaning up a couple little things that came up while the story was sitting, but I do consider it to be done for now, and I'm moving on, and my Ari story has my full attention. So every single time I'm working on a story and I'm, like, totally in love with it, I'm always like, I'm so in love with the story. How is this ever gonna happen again? How am I ever gonna work on another story and be this in love with it again? And, like, I felt that way when I was working on Winter, and now I feel this way when I'm working on Ari's story. And I'm like, I'm probably going to feel this way with the next story because we're not gonna write unless we fall in love. So, so yes, I'm having a really good time. Things are going really well. And yeah. But anyway, so you can let me know if you have any kind of, like, interesting paranoid things that you do about things that you're working on. And yeah, like, feel free to drop a like on the video if you feel so moved. And I am going to go run some errands, which is probably going to drain the rest of my energy, even though I'm just going to the grocery store for, like, 5 things. It's surprisingly taxing. So yeah, so that's all I have to say for this video. And I will see you guys in the next one. And yeah, I hope you're having a great June. And bye.